Hello everyone, welcome you all to the Tech Geek webinar. Thank you for joining the session today. The topic of today's talk is DevOps and Agile on legacy systems making elephants dance. It will be a 1 hour session with around 40 to 45 minutes for the presentation and the remaining time for the Q&A. So if you have any questions, please send them to us using the questions tab on the GoToWebinar control panel. I am Anmol, the moderator of this session, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to our guest speakers, Mr. Ketan Vanjara, Mr. Subir Sen, and Mr. Vimlesh Kumar Modi. Ketan is a seasoned technology executive with 30 plus years of experience in envisioning and leading global software product organizations with a strong focus on innovation and transformation. As a core banking global head at HSBC, Ketan has been successful in pioneering and establishing modernization of legacy systems in spite of complexities posed by an arduous domain like finance in banking system. Ketan has a lot of faith in human potential, which will evolve a future that belongs to inspiration, imagination, and collaboration. Subir Sen is a technology leader with over 25 years of experience in the IT industry and has led large, culturally and geographically diverse global teams delivering business-critical projects on varied technology platforms from IBM I series, IBM Z series to distributed. Mr. Vimlesh Kumar Modi is a techno-functional leader with 18 years experience in program and delivery management of banking applications. As a DevOps lead in HSBC core banking, Vimlesh played a critical role in driving tools implementation, adopting re-engineered process, and managing teams' expectations for DevOps transformation. So without any further delay, let me introduce you all to our guest speaker. Over to you, Ketan.
Thank you, Anmol, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a Friday afternoon, and we'll try to keep it as light as possible. Thanks for joining this webinar. It was a great pleasure to share with you some of the things we have done at HSBC and some pioneering work done on the DevOps and the testing side, especially on what we call as heritage technology. And of course, share some lessons with you as well. And as Anmol said towards the end, we'll also have enough time spared for you to ask us questions. Usually, and this is basically drawn from the book, which is all about making elephants dance, and we all liken heritage technology to dinosaurs, elephants, basically anything that is large, monolithic, and difficult to move. Leave aside dancing, and that's why we gave this session the name that is akin to making elephants dance. Most of the core banking platforms that exist today in the world are on what we call as heritage, what the world calls as legacy technologies, and by those we mean legacy in the sense of really old technologies going back 25, 30, 35 years, like I series, Z series, and stuff like that. So RPG, COBOL, assembler code, all of that. And when we talk about DevOps and BST, we'll come to what BST means in a moment, as an outlier that how can you actually do DevOps in something like core banking. So we started the DevOps journey in HSBC in 2015. That's when we said DevOps knocking at our door. And obviously, initially, DevOps was taken up by new technology teams that were developing some of the new technology platforms and applications in the organization. However, we in core banking wanted to challenge ourselves, and we said, well, why not implement DevOps in core banking too? And that's when we raised our hands. And we set up a small team, and this was aligned to the overall vision of our group CEO, which is basically one of the statements he makes is that the pace of change driven by technology is only likely to accelerate from here. I mean, essentially, the thought process is that the pace of change that we see today is at best going to be the slowest we'll see in future, because as we all know that it keeps on increasing day by day. So with that kind of vision in mind, we said, let us actually make the elephant dance. And so first thing is, what do we mean by an elephant in our context? So in our context, we have multiple elephants, if I put it that way. Basically, all the core banking platforms that we have at HSBC, and we have numerous of them, together comprise those elephants. And now, why do we call them elephants? You can see in the slide the kind of voluminous scale that we operate on in terms of number of transactions, number of accounts, number of countries we are present in, and number of lines of code, or number of million lines of code. And by the way, what we have in here as 20 million lines of code is typically the code per platform. And we have a reasonably unique platform in every country. So 65 countries, each having 20 to 25 million lines of code, supporting several functions, as you can see on the slide, and several businesses. So all the businesses eventually have all the functionality of core banking, right from deposits, lending, payments, pricing, CASA. CASA basically stands for current account, saving account, internal reporting, risk management, everything supported by these core banking platforms. And as I said, that if you multiply 65 countries by 20 million lines of code, we are essentially talking of 1.3 billion lines of code here. All of it written either on COBOL or assembler or RPG. So everything written in technologies that were the latest and the greatest 25, 30 years ago. And the challenge was, how do we make these elephants, or how do we introduce DevOps into these platforms? So the questions we had before we started the whole journey, the challenges we faced at that time were, many of these would be known to many of you, be it concurrent development, be it code review processes, be it all processes being manual except for some degree of automation in testing. Most of the development in those technologies is waterfall. Typically, you don't have too many collaborative platforms available. And the most important thing in today's world is managing and delivering changes in the software would take a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort. And even then, at times we would miss deadlines, at times we would have impact on quality because things are manual, at times there would be testing related issues, and all of this becomes even more difficult given the fact that banking industry is heavily regulated. So we have to meet regulatory deadlines, we can't miss them. And obviously with these kinds of challenges that the technology stack proposes or presents itself with, there was always a challenge of delivering on time, of good quality, and of course the flexibility, the timelines, and the cost. So with those kinds of challenges in mind, as I said earlier, we ourselves raised our hands and braced for a change called DevOps. So the question then is, what is DevOps? Depending on who we talk to, DevOps can have different definitions, different interpretations, and it was really important for us as a team to come up with a very common definition and a common understanding, common interpretation across the organization to ensure that everybody meant the same thing when they said DevOps. So one idea of DevOps is that development and operations work together. Another idea of DevOps is that the same team owns the code right from requirements all the way through support. Another idea of DevOps is that, well, we basically operate in pods, and that's about it. Another idea of DevOps is that, well, we actually do a lot of automation. We introduce CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous development, and stuff like that. And in reality, DevOps is all of this and much more. So when we started working on this, one of the ideas, so I'll take an example here that quite often when we are going through a project development life cycle or software development life cycle, usually the understanding is that if you start with projects in a DevOps pipeline, you will end with projects. If you start with products, you will end with products. And then also, of course, other options or other alternatives available to this. There are possibilities where you can start with projects. So the inflow into a CI/CD pipe could be projects, but the outflow could be products. Or vice versa, where the inflow could be products, especially for organizations that are acquiring software products, and the outflow could be in the form of projects where the products are implemented in the organization. So there are numerous permutations available between what can be called as product platforms and projects. And as we go through the session, we'll explain all of you as to what were the different options we tried and how we were able to successfully implement those. What we concluded as our definition of DevOps was that we will have 3 or 4 tenets of it. Is business, operations, and technology. In our case, technology means IT, work hand in hand together. Business is basically the banking business. The folks in the bank who basically sell our products and services to external customers, who are the customers of HSBC Bank. Operations are people who support those customers. So if you are having any issues when your internet banking or your payment is not processed, typically call up a help desk, and that's attended by the operations team. And that's a different team. And IT is people like us who develop, build, maintain the software. It's very important for these 3 teams to work together, was the first tenet. The second tenet was that we wanted to achieve certain metrics, or what can be called as quantitative outcomes, and we'll come to that in a moment. The third was that we would have the entire CI/CD pipe and automation done as a foundation. We'll come to that in a moment as well. So that's how we choreographed the dance, if I may put it that way, because we've taken the analogy or the paradigm of dancing the elephants. The choreography consisted of 3 elements. The foundation being the tools, which led to automation, and we'll come to that in a moment. We'll go through in more detail. The next layer was establishing, defining, and implementing standard processes across the organization. And the third at the top was also organizing our people, our teams, in a manner that we were able to address most of the challenges. Now, I would want to call out a couple of things here. Each organization should have its own definition of what they want to achieve as a part of DevOps. Of course, you typically take reference from what are the globally accepted definitions. That's part 1. 2, based on the overall goals that the organization wants to achieve from DevOps, they need to have their own choreography or their own script or their own structure of how to achieve it. And 3, the most important thing, DevOps is a great thing, but not a silver bullet to all the challenges. So the challenge that I shared with all of you a couple of slides before, we have been able to address many of them, but not all of them. So be careful and cautious that by implementing DevOps, one does not necessarily address every challenge that exists in the organization. So that's the choreography we started with, and that's the structure and frame we put together. Very simple, but of course very difficult to implement. We'll come to that in a moment as to why very difficult. With that, who is my colleague here in HSBC, and who actually led the entire tooling and CI/CD design, development, deployment, integration in the teams. So Sudhi, over to you.
Thank you very much, Ketan. And I think you have been very crisp and succinct about what the challenges were and how we were planning to address it. So from a tooling perspective, as Ketan mentioned, we have in HSB, in core banking specifically, from a technology perspective, as he mentioned, we have technologies that are from mainframe, IBM I-Series, and also some amount of distributed. So basically, the 2 main core technologies that we have within core banking are mainframe and IBM, called the IBM I. Now, these technologies have been around for quite a while, more than 25, 30 years. Now, there are the ways of doing things on the mainframe are very different from the way things are done on the distributed. And so a few things that I would like to touch upon that we covered as part of tooling and as part of DevOps and Agile. We code review, sometimes the review would happen, sometimes it would not happen. If it happened, it was manual. Concurrent development was one of the issues because it was all linear. For example, if somebody checked out a particular source, it would basically, what it would do is the other person could not check out the same program. So we had to, if we have to get agile, we have to allow concurrent development. The most important thing was building, whatever you develop, there was manual build. There was no collaboration between teams. So these are some of the significant items that were essential for implementing DevOps and Agile in a service line like core banking, which is primarily dominated by heritage systems like the mainframe and the I-series. So how did we do that? So on the slide that you see these are the different steps that you would follow. So you have the product backlog for which we used Rational Team Concert, which is an IBM Rational product, or Jira for capturing all the requirements. Then we have the source code management that is happening within Endeavor on the Z-series, RTC on the I-series, and GitHub for the distributed. With the unit testing was done using build tools. So basically, you would have the unit testing and and the static code analysis. So for that, the integrated development environment for the mainframe was RDZ. For I-series was RDI, and you would use RCAD and Jenkins for orchestration purposes. So for peer review and quality management tools, it was SmartBear and SonarQube. So basically, what we did was we had to make sure that everything that was being deployed was going through some quality gates, and that's where the SonarQube came into play. The next was RCAD and Jenkins. As I said before, they were mainly for orchestration purposes. Then we have the continuous deployment. So basically, what happens is earlier there would be 100 programs that would all get deployed, all get built and packaged at the same time, and then there would be a week-long period when it would get packaged and then delivered. Now, what happens is we develop, we build, we test, we deploy. If there is a bug, we go back and visit the entire cycle. So that's how. And then we have the testing. So basically, for testing purposes, we have the X framework, Tosca, and QC. For source repository purposes, we have the RTC and Nexus for the distributed, for the I-series and the distributed. And for finally, it has to loop back in. So we have to make sure that we monitor what goes into production, and for that we have the GSD, Splunk, and OmegaMon. So this is the tool set that was used and is being used right now by all the teams to help deploy, help develop, build, and deploy in a cyclical manner in shorter sprints, so that we are able to see the product well before we were able to see before. Moving on to the next slide, let me talk about the continuous integration and continuous deployment, which I briefly touched upon before, and something that Ketan mentioned while he was mentioning his bit. This whole cycle, the whole idea of DevOps and Agile is bringing together. So first of all, you do Agile development, where you build in shorter sprints. You have a minimal viable product that the business is able to see. So we have the business come in and see the product that they're expecting to see. So it is built in shorter sprints, and we are able to use the tooling, which is an enabler for being able to deploy in shorter cycles. So as you can see, there's a sprint 1, sprint 2, and sprint 3. And we keep continuously integrating. We have a testing environment which, so having said we have legacy environments, we cannot forget, we cannot be doing production releases every so often, like in the distributed world, which may be every day. What we do is we schedule releases, but for the testing, we build it in smaller packages, then we integrate all these packages, and then we do a delivery maybe once a month to production. So this is how we achieved, so the tooling was an enabler in the DevOps and Agile journey for core banking within HSBC. With this, so as we saw the pyramid, so tooling was one of the aspects that covered the DevOps and Agile journey. The other two are the processes and the people. So I would like to bring in my colleague Vimlesh Kumar Modi, who would kind of elaborate a bit more on those two topics.
Yeah. Hi, Subir. Thanks. Indeed, the tooling, I could sense the motivation level on the ground by the team is feeling. It is definitely helping them to do much more in a simpler way. I will take you through processes and the people side what we did. So we are on the slide 10, which we re-engineered and implemented as part of the DevOps. I would not be able to go through each of incident management, the deployment, and the release management. For moving on to the next slide, where how we approach for the processes implementation. So we identified set of processes across the organization which requires which are manual and not able to were taking longer time. So centrally we re-engineered those processes. For implementation of those processes in the teams, we formed various working groups and had large-scale communication across different teams for creating the awareness amongst the team. And as part of that, definitely there was a lot of collaboration happening between different teams, different are working in number 12, which is about the people part of the slide, which is old ways of working, where each teams are being buckets, and the work flows from one team to another team, as in any traditional waterfall. What DevOps asks is, the cross-functional teams, all this program, the architecture, the development, testing, infrastructure support team, they all should come together and they should work together as a single team, and they should be co-located. So that was one of the key theme of the people organization in DevOps. So cross-functional teams, co-located teams. Also the team who builds the software, they will own for the testing support during SIT, UAT, the integration testing, as well as post-production support. This definitely helps us because it is the same team who is doing all different phases of the software life cycle. It helps us to do make the changes faster, deliver the fixes faster, and having a great turnaround. Now, that was the scope of the people organization. Now, how we achieved it. Moving on to the next slide, which just take us through what are the key steps we went through. So we defined multiple pods across across the core banking based on the different functional areas and the features. We defined the overall framework, how the work would flow from the requirement gathering till the project it is delivered in the product form, all through this pod. And definitely all these pods, the cross-functional teams were co-located. When I say co-located, it is definitely considering we are multi-location teams. So within a specific location, whatever team members available, we co-located, and where in some cases the teams were located different places, but we have a VC facilities, so that was helping us to do the filling the gap in the co-location. So that was about the people part execution. Now, moving on to the next slide, which is so that's how the whole process and the people process re-engineering was implemented. Then the people reorganization into the pods form were done, and now that helps us to make the elephant dance as we adopted this analogy of dancing. Now, moving on to slide number 15, the overall journey of how we moved from the intake 2 years back, so 2.5 years back. So we started in 2016. As Ketan mentioned, we define what we want to do as part of this DevOps journey within core banking. Different tools we require for our automation on I-series, series platforms. This milestone was in Q3 2016, where set of tools were identified. We did the pilot offsite in we trained large number of staff, 1,000 different locations, agile practices. Also, large tools training was and provided to the teams onto the center. In 2000, we identified them as part of our one of the big transformation, the testing BST, which we'll take it through later. And all the projects within core banking started adopting that pipeline. In further driving the adoption of the DevOps tooling and measuring the outcomes. So recently we have got a 8% spike in our DevOps maturity index. So this journey continues further because it's one of the, I would say, start, and we have to drive continuous improvement as we move forward. Moving on to the next slide, where how are we measuring the metrics, DevOps implementation success. So we identified a set of metrics in the beginning of the DevOps journey. What are all the metrics we will to measure the DevOps success? How we would be measuring it? What would be measuring? So those some of the criteria were. If you see here, we have 6 metrics. One of them, the first one is incidents. I'm not going to take you number of incidents happening in production, the service availability in production, right? The time to recover from the outages. how much time are we deploy the change. So in all these 5 metrics, we have for trends, improvement in out of this implementation. The last one is, so as Subir mentioned earlier, because and changes are very complex, it's a heritage systems. So we do not intend to do very frequent releases like distributed, but we improving in this area distribute criteria for the in core banking. The thread to Ketan, who will take us through rest of the BSC journey and some more details of the DevOps implementation.
So just reiterating what English said about the metrics in the previous slide, that while we improve much standard metrics that you'll find globally on DevOps, where on release frequency, it has been kept designed. So make releases, for instance, but then core banking, core platform of the bank doesn't every week. Moving on to this that we pioneered again on the heritage stack called BST. BST stands for Business and Systems Testing. We usually have testing done in a project life cycle as shown in the slide here. We do the entire coding, unit testing, all of that. But then what follows is numerous different cycles of testing. We have SIT, the system integration testing. We have sometimes SAT, which is systems testing. UAT, non-functional requirements. In addition, then release the code into production. So as you can see here, we typically have 7 to 8 different rounds. Mentioned earlier were manual when we started the journey, and we said one part is automated. But if you have, each of them has thousands of test cases to be executed before we can test software, it essentially means automating tens of thousands of test cases. And what it essentially means is some extent what I would call it inefficiency, in the sense that could we do collapse all of these into just one or a maximum of 2 test cycles, which, given that we had that earlier, enabled us to do now. In the older world, we couldn't have probably aimed at doing this. In the newer world, with all the tooling done, we started aiming for this. And we said, let's not only automate, but before automating, let's collapse all of these different stages and cycles of testing into one. And that is where we pioneered what we call as BST. So BST is nothing but collapsing all of those tests into just one stage, one cycle called business and systems testing. Now, one can say this is similar to shift left. Yes, it is. One can say this is test-driven development. Yes, it is. But it is much more than that. So, of course, there are elements of shift left here. Of course, there are elements of test-driven development, because in this kind of a scenario, we essentially get requirements signed off by business in the form of business cases, business scenarios, and then test cases. So to some extent, it is test-driven development as well. But there is one big difference, which we have shown in a small matrix on the right-hand bottom table of both the slides. So in the previous slide, you would have seen that there are 3 dimensions of a platform. One is the core product. The other is the regional layer, because we have multiple regions, and then there is the local layer. There are 3 standard 3-tier architecture of any product platform. And then there are three dimensions on which these need to be tested. One is the dimension of a customer journey. Second is the dimension of a product, that as a product it should all work fine. And third is it should work fine for a project as well. Now, in the conventional testing cycle, we were able to test all of these three layers of architecture only for the projects we were delivering on. But with BST introduced, we are now able to, one, collapse the whole testing cycle substantially. And as a result, we are able to test all the 9 elements, if I may call it, all the 3 tiers of architecture and all the 3 different dimensions. And yet we are able to do it much faster with much less effort and much less cost. The proof of that is in the next slide, where we have shown some charts. This is actual data of our organization, where, as you can see, that from release 1, which was largely non-BST, to release 3, which was entirely BST, how there was a massive difference in the number of test cases. We were able to reduce the total number of test cases by 30%. We were able to reduce efforts by 40 to 47, 25% respectively in IT and business, because UAT is not required anymore. We were able to reduce the infrastructure efforts. The overall schedule collapsed substantially by 54%. So basically, the testing cycle took half the time that it used to take earlier. The incidents reduced by almost 45%, and the quality, that is the defect density, the overall defect density removal, I would say, the quality improved by almost twice. So these are actual results that we have been able to achieve from a business perspective from BST. And then, of course, we said we can't win the full battle if our people are not happy about it. So we also asked our people as to what do BST. And here's something that we heard from some of our team members. So one person says it improved coordination between all the project stakeholders. So all in all, the teams are happier today looking at their development and their deliverables than earlier. We have had some learnings as well. So it's not that all of this happens for free and for easy. So given that it was a massive effort, a huge endeavor, to a large extent we are told we're one of the first such scale and complex enterprise trying this at a global level. And so the key success factors that we've had for this success are, first, any change, as we all know, is essentially the first step is changing the mindset effectively. And that was, of course, something that we attempted. We did a lot of things to do that, probably a discussion for another day. We created a focused team that drove this across the organization globally in all the countries that we have presence in. We had a lot of communication happening regularly and frequently. Again, fairly fundamental aspect of any such massive change management. It was collaborative. We had regular feedback surveys, and we have lots of trainings, as we mentioned earlier. Again, we can deep dive into each one of these substantially, but in the interest of time, because we have lots of questions coming in, I want to rush through it. And we also had a mention of this in the CIO magazine by our global RBWM CIO, where he mentioned that core banking is a classic example of a heritage area where we have actually affected change with the right change management approach. We offered new tools that we have developed ourselves to be learned and adopted. So essentially, the whole DevOps story got carried in the CIO magazine as well. Finally, these are 2 things that I want to mention, that we have talked to a lot of global SI partners, lots of organizations, large global organizations and MNCs. We continue to collaborate with IBM itself, and we are told that we are one of the few, if not the only one, to have implemented end-to-end DevOps tooling across the enterprise in all of these countries of such size, scale, and complexity. So something that we are very proud as a team. And also, we've been pioneers in implementing BST, business and systems testing, within HSBC, and to a large extent, I would say, there's probably very few things I've heard of doing something of this scale and order in the financial sector. So again, a big achievement for the whole team. It was a massive team effort, but essentially, it has brought the teams quite a few years ahead, despite the fact that the platforms are still on the heritage stack. So with that, we come to the end of our presentation. We will probably move over to Q&A, but before that, Amol, you want to chip in?
Hi Ketan, I would like to tell you that one of our attendees, Mr. Murlidhar Madala, has congratulated you and your team for achieving such results in a matter of 2.5 years. And
Thank you very much.
Ketan, you may now take up the questions. They are displaying in the questions panel.
Okay. So let me start with the first question here from a person called Venkat S. How do you manage the legacy mainframes for CI/CD? The system takes its own time to up and down the environments for new releases. So this pertinent tooling, and I have my tooling expert here, Subir. You want to answer this as to how we do CI/CD in mainframes?
Yeah, thank you, Ketan. So basically, for the mainframe, we have the tools that are there. We have CI/CD, so we have the tools in place for right from source code management all the way to build and deployment. As you rightly pointed out, I mean, it takes time, but we have Endeavor and we have something called as the ALC, which we have piloted, and we're trying to basically use it for the continuous build pipeline. So we have had several discussions with IBM on this as to how we can have the environments send it to, and as Ketan mentioned, we have this one environment called as the BST for testing. So basically, we maintain two separate environments. One is where we do the entire testing, and then once we are ready, we kind of send it to the final environment where, so bringing an environment up or bringing it down for effecting changes does not really impact us, because we maintain this testing environment, which is an integrated testing environment separately, where all the changes are delivered. And then finally, when we are ready, that's when we bring the final environment down, upload our chip, send our packages, and bring the environment up.
Okay, thanks, Subir. And if I may just add to this different dimension from an environment perspective, because yes, they do take their own time to up and down, but in an organization like ours, which is basically providing banking services, our environments are typically 24/7. So unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of upping and downing the environments, if I put it that way. But within those, we manage these CI/CD cycles, and of course, we have also automated lots of schedulers and stuff like that. So that helps us achieve it. A couple of quick questions. One is by Mr. Murlidhar Madala. Thank you again for congratulating us. Any particular reason you call your systems heritage instead of legacy? Yes, a very big reason actually. And actually it would tie into another question, which is also a very, very good question, is your slides talk about processes and people, but how about culture? How did you change and measure culture by a person called Jitendra Mohan? So very good questions, and these are kind of interconnected. If you typically look at the stack we are in, it is always referred to by the industry as legacy stack. Now, we borrowed this term heritage from what I would call as architecture, or actually cultural aspects of any civilization. So depending on which city of India you are in, you will have a lot of monuments which can be called as old structures or which can be called as heritage. Now you call them old dilapidated structures, you don't invite any tourists. You call them heritage, you actually create a lot of interest, and in reality, those heritage symbols of our culture are actually very interesting from a historical standpoint because they have lots to convey, and I think very similarly for the heritage systems as well. So that was the, I would say, reason why we changed it from legacy to heritage, basically instilling a sense of pride in the teams that even if you are writing code on COBOL, RPG, or assembler, there is no reason you should be proud about yourself. You can do as good from a DevOps and sprint and delivery standpoint as any team that's working on Spring Boot or R Plus or Python or stuff like that. So that was the purpose. And that in turn dives into the whole cultural aspect. Very, very good question. In fact, if I may just mention, what you see in an organization is tools, processes, and people. What is usually the unseen but the feel factor is the culture. And therefore, we couldn't have shown it in a slide. It's the unseen feel factor. But you're absolutely right. And therefore, if you look at the key success factors we shared, the first key success factor was change in culture, change in mindset. To be very honest, when we raised our hand, not only many of the team members in core banking, but the rest of the organization were also looking at us with questioning looks. That, are you really sure? Do you think you can do this? You must be joking. Oh, okay, you also want to try something and that was fine enough, try. I mean, there were all kinds of comments, or at least gestures and faces that we did see. But as we started rolling out smaller successes initially, the things started changing. People are realizing we mean business, we are serious about it. The first important thing to crack was two things. There's one thing I mentioned earlier, that don't look at DevOps to be a silver bullet that will solve all our problems. So we set expectations with the team as to what we wanted them to achieve. That's one part. The second part, one of my favorites, I call it as YFM radio. We all know Wi-Fi and we all know FM, but I've sort of combined the two into YFM. And what I mean by that is what's in it for me. So we did run campaigns for the teams that, well, there is not only a benefit for business in this, there is a benefit for you as well. Example, before we implemented these tools, all our team members worked on green screens. I'm sure some of you know, many of you may not have seen them, lucky you. But green screens is very common in legacy technology stack. And we started conveying to them that what if you were to work on the similar screens, similar UIs that your digital friends work on as well. Certainly a very interesting proposition to the teams. Or today you have to complete this particular project performing, say, 12 different tasks all manually. How about me relieving you of 6 of those tasks, which is automatically, and you focus on the other 6, therefore giving you time for your own development, doing something better, something more intelligent. So various kind of initiatives were run during these 2.5 years. It was, I would completely agree, primarily a cultural shift. And then, of course, we had tools and processes and people and all that part as well. So good question. Yes, culture is absolutely important in any such change management initiative, especially when you're trying to try something so modern into something so heritage. Thank you for the questions. Going to the next one. How do we manage version dependencies between packages? So do you want to take that?
Yes, thanks, Ketan. So this is a very excellent question. How do we manage version dependencies between packages? So let me tell you first, I need to give you the background that we are on iSeries. Basically, we have implemented this tooling and DevOps on traditional or heritage systems like iSeries and IBM mainframes, right? Now, so the way we do this is whenever there is a package to be delivered, for example, if there is a, I'll state this with an example. Let us say if there is a package to be delivered on this weekend. There are simultaneous developments happening. There could be something that is going to get delivered, let's say a month down the line, or maybe 2 weeks down the line. So what happens is the changes, and let's say if the same program is going to get modified in a later release, then there is in the common environment. So basically, when the developers develop or deliver their code, it goes to a common stream, which is called the common development stream, and the people that are going to be delivering their code later on will be taking in the code that is going to be delivered as a package, let's say this weekend. Okay, so that way they have, so the team that is going to be delivering later has the changes which is going to be delivered in the immediate future. So that is one thing. Secondly, there is the tool that we are using is called as ARCAD on the IBM I. What it does is it has got its own cross-reference and repository. So for the first time when it is being built, when a package is being built, it refers to that repository. But let us say somebody has already created a version. Then it knows intelligently that this particular source has been checked out and picked into a version that is being currently worked upon, and it will refer to that version. If that version has not yet been closed, it will refer to the version that is current. So that way you will have these inter-package dependencies, and you don't end up in missing changes that might already have got delivered. I hope that would have answered the question.
Thanks, Subir. There are a couple of more on tools, and why don't you take those as well? So can you share what all tools and solutions you considered? Yes, we did share them on the slide, and I suppose the slides would be available to you in the recording subsequently. And why did you opt for the current tool set is one. The other is there's more on tools. Your solution is more towards dev side. What about infra and ops guys, configuration management, etc.? So both by again Jitendra Mohan. So we want to quickly answer those as well.
Yeah, I think I'll go for the configuration, the one that I'll talk about, the first one. So it is again, on a legacy side of things or heritage side of things, it is slightly different from the way we do it in distributed. Okay, so what I mean by that is one of the things that I want to stress upon here is that one of the factors for our success has been collaboration and co-location, which was touched upon by Ketan and Vimlesh earlier on. And what we mean by that is not just the development teams. It is also having the infrastructure teams who were sat along with us, and so they knew exactly what we wanted from them, and we knew exactly what they were looking for. So, for example, today we are at a point where once an environment is set up, the CI/CD pipeline set up, we don't need the infrastructure teams to deliver the code. I'll tell you what I mean by that is we have something called as a data center operations, which when a package is delivered, it goes and sits on the production box. In 2 days before the release, it goes and sits on the production box. It was the job of the data center operator to go and release that job and on a day of release, during the release time window, to make sure that the package gets released to production. Now, there has been an email that has gone out saying that this activity will no longer be performed. So which will be performed by the environment, the people that manage the environment and people that manage the releases. So which means that, we have kind of, again, in that area too, we have shifted left. So from an infrastructure perspective, we don't need to create separate, we don't need to keep creating environments, because we have one standard environment that will be used for testing. And once we have done the testing, we move it to the UAT for the final testing with all the changes that are going through in that package, and then we deploy it to production.
Thanks, Subir. I'll take some quick, what I would call as rapid fire questions, because they are questions that require very quick and brief, crisp answers. There's a question from Praveen Yalavar, a very generic question. We hear so much about DevOps where we say pillars are tool, chain, process, and people. In theory, we consider people at first. However, on floor, tools carry more value. What's your view on it? Well, actually, everything goes hand in hand. It's a framework. People have to be trained. Culture has to be changed. But the reality is that there is a huge fundamental requirement, so prerequisite of having the tools. So it's not that tools carry more value, but without the tools, even if we have the best of people, the entire CI/CD automation is not feasible, and therefore it's more of a prerequisite, I would say. But all three are equally important, is how I would view it. There's another one which says, "What is POD's abbreviation?" by Manu Sharma. He has left actually, so but it has no abbreviation for this particular purpose. It's more like a unit of team, which I suppose many of us know. How DevOps related to AWS? Please explain, sir. Okay, this person hasn't mentioned his name. Well, DevOps is more of a development deployment framework, while AWS is more of a platform. So you can have DevOps on any platform, AWS, Google Cloud, mainframes, as we have done. It's more of a framework versus a platform for development environment, hosting, production, etc. Right? Who will be deciding DevOps tooling? The actual team that works on development, testing, and deployment should work together, collaborate together, and come up with the tools required for CI/CD. They should not be imposed top-down. That's how we did it. Our teams collaborated. What we did was we did bring some experts, SMEs, to throw in lots of new ideas and new tools that were available that some of our teams were not aware of. So yes, awareness should be provided so that you know the whole landscape of tools available, but selection should be done by the teams that actually work on the stuff and not by somebody else. Do you consider performance testing in the CI pipeline? Absolutely yes. It's a part of BST, without which we cannot actually release our products, especially in a bank-like scenario where we handle millions of transactions every day. As mentioned, the frequency of changes within core banking is less. That is, therefore, I have two questions by Harish Srigiri. One, was the before methodology not good enough for you to carry on, means moving instead of moving DevOps? No, it wasn't, and we showed you the metrics where we had lots of improvements. So we certainly gained from DevOps. And two, with the implementation of DevOps, what benefit the department, the organization has seen? I think we showed that to you in the metrics slide, where in different areas, from quality perspective, from a flexibility perspective, from a time to market perspective, deployment, time to recover, we have had massive improvements in our metrics. So there is measurable improvement in the outcomes that could not have been achieved if we had not implemented DevOps. In the interest of time, I'll probably take a couple of last questions. How was the transition phase handled? Was the process in a mixed mode? Yes, it was. And again, what we did was we started moving our teams, our code, and our artifacts to the CI/CD DevOps pipes in stages and phases. So it was not that one fine evening on a Friday evening we all left for home and then we came back on Monday morning, everything was DevOps. It was in a phased manner, and there was what you've said is a mixed mode here. So thanks, Rakesh, for the question. The last question that I would like to take, because we're just running out of time, does sprint development take more time? No, our sprints are 2-week sprints, like any of the standard industry sprints. So it takes the same time. And probably we have minutes or half a minute. I'll take one last one. Where we use microservices in DevOps. Chandan Kumar, he has left, but for the interest of those who are still on the call, again, DevOps, as I said, is more of a development lifecycle framework, while microservices is an architectural paradigm. So you can have microservices without DevOps, DevOps without microservices, and again, you can have both of them together as well. So with that, I think we're running out of time. So Amol, back over to you, our moderator, for any last closing comments.
Thank you so much, Ketan, Sudhir, and Vimlesh, for this really empowering and motivating session today. I would also like to thank all our participants for making this webinar a great success. This session has been recorded and the recording will soon be available on techgeek.com. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you so much, Ketan, Sudhir, and Vimlesh.
Thank you.
Thank you.